Most men have no idea that one sentence can completely change the way a woman thinks about them after a conversation ends. Not because the sentence is smooth, not because it sounds romantic, but because it touches something emotional inside her that most men never notice. And once that happens, she keeps replaying the moment in her head long after you're gone. The problem is that most guys speak to women in a way that feels generic, predictable, and emotionally forgettable. They focus too much on appearance, and not enough on emotional impact. That is why some men get attention for a moment, while other men stay in a woman's mind for days without even trying too hard. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Isabella, and on this channel we talk about female psychology, attraction, emotional connection, relationships, and the hidden emotional triggers most men never learn about. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because these videos will completely change the way you understand attraction and communication. Now let's continue, because what I'm about to explain today is something most men go their whole lives without understanding. A lot of men think attraction is mostly about confidence, looks, money, or saying the perfect line, but psychology shows that emotional impact matters far more than most people realize. Women remember how a man makes them feel emotionally much longer than the exact words he said. And this is where most men fail without knowing it. They compliment women in the same boring way every other man does. You're beautiful. Nice smile. Pretty eyes. Now, let's be honest. Those compliments are not bad, but the problem is that women hear them constantly. There is no emotional depth attached to them anymore. They pass through her mind and disappear because there is nothing personal, specific, or emotionally memorable about them. But the moment a compliment feels emotionally real, specific, and unexpected, something changes psychologically. Her mind pauses. She starts feeling emotionally noticed instead of visually observed. And that creates emotional curiosity. Women are naturally more emotionally aware in communication than most men understand. They notice tone, timing, emotional intention, and subtle emotional energy behind words. That is why two men can say similar things, but one feels forgettable, while the other stays in her mind all night. The difference is emotional presence. And today, I'm going to break down 3 types of compliments that create emotional impact in a completely different way, because they speak to deeper emotional parts of a woman's identity, instead of just surface-level attraction. Before we continue, comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because I love seeing people from different parts of the world joining these conversations. The first compliment is powerful because it makes a woman feel mentally and emotionally seen instead of simply physically noticed. And honestly, this is where most men completely separate themselves from everybody else. The compliment is this: I really like the way your mind works. Simple, calm, but psychologically very powerful when said sincerely. Now, most men would never think a sentence like this could affect a woman deeply because they assume attraction is built mostly through physical compliments. But women process emotional recognition very differently from men. A woman already knows when she looks attractive. She hears comments about her appearance all the time from social media, strangers, co-workers, and random men trying to impress her. After a while, those compliments stop feeling meaningful because they become expected. But when a man notices the way she thinks, her perspective, her humor, her creativity, her emotional intelligence, or the way she sees the world, it creates a completely different emotional reaction. Because now she feels understood, not just admired. And honestly, that feeling is rare. Most people in life look at women without actually paying attention to them deeply. That is why emotional recognition feels so powerful psychologically. It touches identity, not just appearance. And here is something many men never realize. Women remember men who make them think differently about themselves. The moment you genuinely appreciate the way her mind works, her brain immediately starts replaying conversations between you. She starts wondering, what exactly did he notice? What made him say that? What part of me stood out to him? And that curiosity creates emotional replay, not because the sentence was dramatic, but because it felt personal. This is why emotional specificity matters so much in attraction. Generic compliments disappear quickly. Specific emotional observations stay longer in the mind. And another thing that makes this compliment powerful is that it feels emotionally safe instead of emotionally aggressive. You are not pressuring her. You are not trying too hard to impress her. You are simply noticing something real about her that most people overlook. That kind of emotional awareness instantly separates you from men who only focus on looks. But here's the important part. The compliment only works when it comes from genuine attention. Women are extremely sensitive to emotional authenticity. If it sounds rehearsed, manipulative, or forced, the emotional impact disappears immediately. That is why emotional presence matters more than memorized lines. When you truly listen to a woman, pay attention to details, and speak calmly with confidence, your words carry emotional weight naturally. And honestly, this is what many women secretly want. Not endless praise, not fake charm, but to feel emotionally understood by someone who actually notices who they are beneath the surface. The second compliment works on a much deeper emotional level because it touches something many women quietly think about but rarely say out loud. The compliment is this: there's something about your energy that stays with me. Now, to most men, this may sound simple or even slightly vague. But psychologically, this kind of compliment can stay in a woman's mind for a very long time because it speaks to emotional impact instead of physical appearance. And honestly, many women spend a huge part of their lives wondering how they truly affect people emotionally. Not just whether they look attractive, but whether they are memorable. Whether their presence means something. Whether someone genuinely feels them beyond surface conversation. That is why this compliment hits differently. You are not talking about her body. You are not talking about her clothes. You are talking about the emotional feeling she leaves behind after she is gone. And emotionally, that feels powerful. Because now she feels like she affected you naturally, without forcing anything. This creates emotional significance in her mind. And once a woman feels emotionally significant to a man, attraction can deepen very quickly. But here's what makes this compliment psychologically strong. It creates curiosity and mystery at the same time. The moment you say her energy stays with you, her brain immediately starts wondering, what exactly about me stayed with him? What moment affected him? What did he notice? And that emotional curiosity keeps replaying the interaction long after the conversation ends. This is important because attraction often grows through emotional imagination more than people realize. Women replay emotional moments internally. They revisit tone, eye contact, timing, emotional tension, and subtle details. And when a compliment creates emotional replay, it becomes emotionally memorable. That is why some men stay in a woman's mind without constantly texting or chasing her. Their emotional presence created impact. And another reason this compliment works so well is because it feels emotionally effortless. You are not trying too hard. You are not over-explaining. You are not emotionally overwhelming her. You are simply expressing an emotional truth calmly and confidently. That calm emotional certainty feels attractive because it feels grounded. And honestly, grounded emotional energy is rare today. Most people communicate from anxiety, pressure, performance, or the need for validation. But when a man speaks slowly, sincerely, and without trying to force attraction, women feel emotionally safer around him. That safety allows emotional openness to grow naturally. And here is something many men overlook completely. Women are often more affected by how a man makes them feel emotionally than by how impressive he tries to appear. A man who makes a woman feel emotionally seen, emotionally calming, emotionally memorable, or emotionally understood will usually stay in her mind far longer than a man who only tries to impress her on the surface. Because emotional impact creates emotional attachment. And emotional attachment is what truly separates temporary attention from lasting attraction. The third compliment is probably the deepest one emotionally, because it creates a feeling many women secretly crave in relationships but rarely experience consistently. The compliment is this: I feel calmer when I talk to you. Now let's be honest, most men would never think a sentence like this could be attractive, because modern dating teaches men to always appear emotionally hard, emotionally distant, or emotionally unaffected. Many men think vulnerability automatically makes them look weak. But psychology says something very different. When emotional honesty is expressed calmly and confidently, it creates emotional trust. And emotional trust is one of the strongest foundations of attraction. When you tell a woman she brings calm into your life, you are communicating something much deeper than attraction. You are telling her that her presence affects your emotional state in a positive way. That feels incredibly meaningful to many women, because most women already know when a man finds them physically attractive, but very few men communicate emotional appreciation in a grounded and mature way. And here is why this compliment affects women so deeply, psychologically. Women naturally connect through emotional presence. A woman wants to feel like her energy brings peace, comfort, emotional safety, or emotional balance to someone she cares about. Not because she wants to fix a man, but because emotional connection matters deeply to feminine psychology. So when you calmly say you feel more relaxed, more peaceful, or more emotionally settled around her, she begins feeling emotionally important in a completely different way. Now she is no longer just attractive to you, she feels emotionally valuable to you. That changes everything. And honestly, this is where emotional intimacy begins growing naturally. Because emotional intimacy is not created only through flirting or chemistry. It grows when two people start affecting each other emotionally in meaningful ways. This is why some conversations stay in a woman's mind for days, not because the man said something flashy, but because he made her feel emotionally safe, emotionally connected, and emotionally understood. And another reason this compliment works is because it feels human. It does not sound performative. It does not sound manipulative. It sounds emotionally real. And emotionally real communication stands out strongly today because so much modern dating feels fake, rushed, surface level, or emotionally shallow. But here is the important part many men miss. The compliment works because of the emotional energy behind it. If you say it while sounding emotionally desperate, needy, or emotionally dependent, it loses its strength completely. But when you say it calmly, naturally, and with emotional confidence, it feels grounding instead of heavy. And grounded masculine energy creates emotional safety for women psychologically. That is why emotionally intelligent women often feel deeply attracted to men who make them feel emotionally safe instead of emotionally pressured. Because peace creates attachment far more deeply than performance ever will. Now that you understand the three compliments, you need to understand something even more important. The words themselves are not the real magic. It is the emotional feeling behind the words that creates the impact. This is where many men fail completely. They hear a compliment works, then immediately turn it into a technique, a script, or some performance they repeat mechanically with every woman they meet. And the moment that happens, the emotional power disappears. Because women are extremely sensitive to emotional authenticity. A woman may not always explain it logically, but she can usually feel when a man is trying too hard, forcing attraction, or saying things only to get a reaction from her. And once something feels performative, emotional attraction weakens immediately. That is why emotional presence matters more than memorized lines. When a compliment comes from genuine observation, it lands differently. It feels natural. It feels emotionally safe. It feels believable. And honestly, women are constantly paying attention to emotional details men overlook. Your tone, your timing, your eye contact, your emotional calmness, your confidence. The emotional energy surrounding the words often matters more than the sentence itself. This is why two different men can say the exact same thing, but only one creates emotional impact. One sounds like he is seeking approval. The other sounds emotionally grounded. That difference changes everything psychologically. And another thing many men misunderstand is this. Women are not usually attracted to men who try hardest. They are attracted to men who feel emotionally centered and emotionally aware. A man who is calm, observant, emotionally present, and intentional immediately feels different from men who constantly chase validation or attention. And this is why emotional pacing matters so much. You cannot rush emotional connection. You cannot force emotional depth through nonstop compliments. In fact, too much praise too quickly often creates emotional pressure instead of attraction. But when a compliment comes at the right moment, naturally, and with emotional sincerity, it becomes memorable, because now the woman feels like you truly noticed something real about her, instead of simply trying to impress her. And honestly, that feeling is rare today. Most conversations in dating stay at the surface level. People talk, flirt, joke, and move on without ever feeling emotionally understood. But the moment a woman feels emotionally recognized in a sincere way, attraction can deepen much faster, because emotional connection creates emotional trust. And emotional trust is what makes someone start replaying moments in their head afterward, not because the interaction was perfect, but because it felt emotionally genuine. That is why the goal is not to use lines on women. The goal is to become emotionally aware enough to communicate in a way that feels real, grounded, and emotionally intentional. Because real emotional connection always leaves a stronger impression than performance ever will. One thing most men never realize is that attraction often grows quietly before it becomes obvious. Many women do not instantly express strong feelings directly. Instead, attraction builds internally through emotional replay. This is where emotional psychology becomes very interesting. When a woman keeps thinking about a conversation after it ends, her emotional attachment to the experience starts growing automatically. She begins replaying your tone, your words, your eye contact, the emotional feeling of the interaction, and most importantly, how you made her feel about herself. That replay matters more than most men understand. Because women are highly emotionally reflective, they naturally revisit emotional experiences in their minds, especially when something about the interaction felt meaningful, calming, emotionally safe, or emotionally different from what they usually experience. And honestly, this is why emotional impact is far more powerful than trying too hard to impress. A man who constantly performs for attention often creates temporary excitement, but a man who creates emotional resonance stays in her mind much longer. There is a huge psychological difference between those two things. Temporary excitement fades quickly. Emotional resonance lingers. And this is why emotionally grounded men tend to create deeper attraction without needing to force it. They are not desperately trying to prove themselves every second. They are present. They listen carefully. They speak intentionally. They make a woman feel emotionally understood instead of emotionally pressured. That kind of emotional experience is rare enough that women remember it. And another thing many men overlook completely is this. Women are constantly evaluating emotional safety, not only physical safety, emotional safety. Can she relax around you emotionally? Can she speak freely without feeling judged? Can she feel understood without feeling pressured? Can she feel emotionally feminine without needing to emotionally protect herself constantly? These questions matter psychologically more than many men realize. Because attraction grows faster when emotional tension is balanced with emotional comfort. Too much pressure creates resistance. Too much emotional distance creates disconnection. But calm emotional confidence creates curiosity and emotional openness naturally. This is why emotionally mature women are often drawn toward men who feel emotionally stable instead of emotionally chaotic. And honestly, this is where many men accidentally destroy attraction. They become too reactive emotionally, too needy, too available too quickly, too focused on trying to win the woman instead of simply connecting with her naturally. But attraction deepens when a woman feels your attention is intentional instead of desperate. That is why emotionally grounded communication matters so much. When your words, tone, and emotional energy feel aligned, women trust your presence more deeply. And once a woman emotionally trusts your presence, attraction stops feeling forced. It starts feeling natural. That is the difference between surface-level flirting and real emotional connection. Another thing men need to understand is that women remember emotional atmosphere far longer than most specific conversations. A woman may eventually forget the exact words you used, but she will remember how she felt sitting across from you, listening to you, and emotionally experiencing your presence. That is why presence matters so much psychologically. And honestly, this is where many men unknowingly sabotage themselves. They focus too much on saying the perfect thing instead of creating the right emotional experience. They become mentally tense during conversations. They overthink every response. They try too hard to sound impressive, funny, mysterious, or emotionally perfect. But that nervous energy changes the emotional atmosphere completely. Women are extremely sensitive to emotional tension. Even if she cannot explain it logically, she can feel when a man is emotionally grounded versus emotionally seeking validation from her. That emotional difference changes attraction immediately. A man who feels calm emotionally creates calm emotionally. A man who feels desperate creates pressure emotionally, and pressure quietly kills attraction. This is why emotionally confident men often seem naturally attractive without doing very much. Their energy feels relaxed, emotionally safe, and emotionally certain. They are not trying to force chemistry every second. They are simply comfortable being present. That comfort allows a woman's emotional guard to lower naturally. And once emotional comfort appears, attraction has room to grow. Another thing many men overlook is silence, not awkward silence, calm silence. Most men rush conversations because they fear emotional pauses. They think they must constantly entertain, impress, or maintain momentum. But emotionally mature communication is slower, intentional, grounded, certain. When you speak slowly and comfortably, your words feel more emotionally believable. Your compliments land deeper because they do not feel rushed or performative. And women notice this immediately because emotional calmness often signals emotional confidence psychologically. That is why tone matters so much. A simple compliment delivered with calm certainty feels stronger than 10 exaggerated compliments delivered with nervous energy. And honestly, this is why some men stay unforgettable while others become emotionally forgettable within hours. One creates emotional experience, the other creates emotional noise. Women rarely fantasize about the loudest man in the room emotionally. They often think about the man who made them feel emotionally understood, emotionally safe, emotionally curious, or emotionally calm. That emotional impact creates memory. And memory creates emotional attachment over time. This is also why emotional authenticity matters so much. The moment a woman feels manipulation, emotional performance, or fake confidence, her emotional trust drops immediately. But when your communication feels natural, emotionally honest, and grounded, attraction develops more smoothly because she feels emotionally safe enough to stay emotionally open around you. And honestly, emotional openness is where real attraction begins growing deeply. One of the deepest things women look for emotionally is emotional certainty. Not perfection, not a man who says all the right things every second, but a man whose energy feels emotionally steady and emotionally real. And honestly, this is why some men become unforgettable without even trying too hard. It is not because they are the richest, the loudest, or the most physically attractive man in the room. It is because their presence feels emotionally grounding. Women naturally relax around men who feel emotionally stable because emotional stability creates trust, and trust is one of the strongest foundations of attraction. Most men think attraction is created by constantly trying to impress a woman, But many times that effort creates the opposite effect. The harder a man tries to force attraction, the more emotionally pressured the interaction starts feeling. Women can sense when a man is trying too hard to get approval from them. They notice the nervous energy, the over-explaining, the forced confidence, and the constant need to impress. Even if the words sound good on the surface, the emotional energy underneath them feels unstable. But when a man speaks calmly, listens naturally, and stays emotionally centered during conversation, women experience him differently. He feels emotionally safe. He feels emotionally mature. He feels emotionally present instead of emotionally performative. And that emotional difference changes how deeply a woman remembers the interaction afterward. This is why emotional pacing matters so much in attraction. You do not need to constantly fill every silence. You do not need to impress her every minute. You do not need to overload conversations with non-stop compliments or emotional intensity. In fact, many women become more emotionally curious when a man feels relaxed enough to let conversations breathe naturally. Calmness communicates confidence psychologically. And honestly, this is where emotional attraction becomes powerful. A woman starts associating your presence with emotional comfort instead of emotional pressure. She feels like she can emotionally relax around you instead of constantly performing herself. That emotional comfort allows her personality, emotions, and attraction to open naturally over time. Another thing many men overlook is emotional consistency. Women trust emotional consistency far more than emotional excitement alone. A man who feels grounded one day, but emotionally chaotic the next, creates confusion. But a man whose energy feels calm, intentional, and emotionally balanced creates emotional safety. And emotional safety is what makes attraction deepen instead of fading quickly after the excitement wears off. That is why emotional presence matters more than clever lines ever will. Women may forget specific words eventually, but they rarely forget how a man made them feel emotionally when they were around him. Another thing men need to understand is that emotional attraction becomes stronger when a woman feels emotionally understood without feeling emotionally pressured. That balance is extremely important psychologically because many women are used to conversations where men are either too surface level or far too intense too quickly. One man barely pays attention emotionally, while another overwhelms her with non-stop validation, forced flirting, or emotional neediness. But the men women often remember most are the ones who create emotional depth naturally without forcing it. This is why emotional awareness matters so much. When you truly pay attention to a woman, you start noticing emotional details most men completely miss. You notice the things she lights up talking about. You notice how her tone changes when she feels comfortable. You notice the little emotional shifts behind her words instead of only reacting to surface conversation. And when your responses show that you actually noticed those details, she feels emotionally recognized in a way that feels rare. That feeling stays with women much longer than men realize, because emotionally intelligent communication creates emotional significance. A woman starts feeling like you are interacting with her as a real person instead of simply reacting to her appearance. And honestly, many women secretly crave that kind of connection because so much modern dating feels emotionally shallow and performative. Another reason this matters psychologically is because emotional recognition creates trust. The moment a woman feels emotionally safe being fully herself around a man, attraction often deepens naturally because her guard starts lowering without force. She becomes more open emotionally, more relaxed, and more curious about the connection herself. And this is where many men accidentally ruin attraction. They become impatient. They try to rush emotional closeness. They chase constant reassurance or immediate validation instead of allowing emotional connection to build gradually. But attraction usually grows stronger when emotional tension and emotional comfort are balanced correctly. This is why grounded men often appear more attractive over time. Their communication feels emotionally stable. Their compliments feel intentional instead of excessive. Their presence feels calm instead of emotionally demanding. And women emotionally remember calm, masculine energy far longer than loud performance. At the end of the day, attraction is not really about saying perfect words. It is about making a woman feel emotionally understood, emotionally safe, emotionally significant, and emotionally comfortable enough to open her inner world naturally around you. And when a man creates that feeling consistently, he stops becoming just another conversation in her life. He becomes someone she keeps